My son barred me from his wedding, but handed me an $80,000 bill for the luxury party. He wanted my money, but not my presents. So I decided to cancel his perfect day and teach him a lesson in dignity he will never forget. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet of my Lexington home, the October afternoon light filtering through the faded curtains. The envelope had arrived that morning, thick and cream-colored with my son Kevin's precise handwriting on the front. I had assumed it was the wedding invitation after months of radio silence. My fingers traced the seal, a small thrill of hope stirring despite everything. I tore it open carefully, expecting elegant cardstock announcing the date and the venue. Perhaps even a note asking me to walk him down the aisle like we joked about years ago. There was no invitation. Instead, a stack of papers slid out. Itemized bills, crisp and professional, totaling $80,000. My eyes scanned the lines. $50,000 for the mansion rental near Lexington, a sprawling estate with manicured gardens and crystal chandeliers. $20,000 for catering, including imported wines and lobster flown in from Maine. Another $10,000 for the honeymoon suite on Maui, complete with private beach access. Tucked at the bottom was a handwritten note from Kevin. Dad, after the problems you've caused the family, be grateful that I allowed you to contribute. This covers your share. Send the check soon. Victoria and I are counting on it. I stared at the words, the paper cool and smooth under my fingertips. Problems? He meant the problems he'd thrown in my face during our last argument, blaming me for not climbing higher in my engineering career, for the modest life we'd led after his mother Elena died. My hand trembled slightly as I set the note down. Nearby on the table sat a framed photo of young Kevin, gap-toothed and grinning from a Little League game, his tiny hand in mine. How had that boy turned into this man? He was demanding money like I was an ATM while banning me from his wedding because I didn't fit his polished image. Shock hit first, a cold wave that made my chest tighten. I crumpled the note in my fist, the paper crackling like dry leaves, but then I smoothed it out again, laying it flat. No, I wouldn't let anger consume me blindly. I pushed back from the table, standing up slowly, my knees protesting the movement. The kitchen felt smaller, the walls closing in with memories of family dinners long gone. I walked to the sink, splashing water on my face, but it didn't wash away the sting. Kevin thought he could erase me from his life while dipping into my savings. This was the nest egg I'd built through years of overtime and scrimping after losing Elena to cancer in 2015. He'd called me once after her funeral, his voice clipped and accusing. "You should have done more, Dad, for all of us." I returned to the table, picking up an old pocket watch, a family heirloom from my father. Its chain was worn from generations of hard work. It ticked steadily in my palm, a reminder of bonds that should endure. But Kevin had severed ours. He was banning me because Victoria whispered that a simple pensioner would embarrass their tech executive crowd. I smiled then, a slow, bitter curve of my lips as the hurt twisted into something sharper. Resolve. I set the bill aside, folding it neatly, and felt a spark ignite deep inside. Kevin thought he could manipulate me, but he was mistaken. I knew a direct confrontation would get me nowhere. He'd dismiss me as he always did, but I could gather information. I could find cracks in their perfect plan. My old laptop sat on the kitchen counter, dusty but ready. Time to find out what they were really up to. I settled into the chair, the rain now a steady drum outside, and opened the browser with purposeful clicks. Kevin's social media profiles were private, but Victoria's wasn't. She loved flaunting their life. I scrolled through her posts, each one a stab. "Can't wait for our dream wedding at the Ashford estate," she wrote. The date jumped out. November 15, 2024, just weeks away. Photos showed the mansion, its grand ballroom decked in mock setups, chandeliers sparkling like diamonds. I sipped from a glass of the cheap red wine I'd been saving, its bitter tang sharpening my focus. No more wallowing. I jotted notes on a pad. Venue, Ashford Estate, $50,000 rental. Caterer, elite events, boasting farm to table for 200 guests. Photographer, a high-end pro named Laya Voss. The extravagance was staggering, far beyond what Kevin's salary could cover without my contribution. My hands steadied on the keyboard as I found the contact information for Mark Brennan, the wedding planner at the heart of it all. I picked up my phone, fingers hovering over the dial pad. The phone rang twice before a polished voice answered. Mark Brennan Events. This is Mark speaking. How can I make your day extraordinary? I leaned against the kitchen counter, the receiver cool against my ear. Hello, Mark. This is Steven Torres. I'm Kevin's father, the one footing the bill for his wedding. Mark's voice warmed instantly. Mr. Torres, Kevin mentioned you'd be calling to finalize payments. We're thrilled you're contributing. The Ashford estate is booked solid, and Victoria's vision is coming together beautifully. I let him ramble for a moment about floral arches and string quartets. My mind was sharpening like a blade. Actually, Mark, I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can we meet tomorrow? I have some details to clarify. He agreed quickly, suggesting his downtown Lexington office at 10 a.m. I hung up, the click echoing in the quiet room. No more hiding behind notes and bills. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing the bill again, jotting down key figures to keep the facts at hand. $80,000. It was a king's ransom for a man who didn't want his father in the room. The next morning, I drove through light traffic. The autumn leaves swirled like confetti on the windshield. A brief hesitation gripped me at a red light. Was this the point of no return? I dismissed it, accelerating as the light turned green. Mark's office was in a sleek building off Main Street, all glass and chrome. It was a far cry from my engineering firm's old brick setup. Mark greeted me with a firm handshake. His suit was tailored and his tie was knotted perfectly. Mr. Torres, come in. Coffee? He led me to a plush chair opposite his desk, which was piled with swatches and contracts. A framed photo of a beaming couple under a gazebo caught my eye, stirring a quiet resolve. That joy wouldn't be Kevin's, not on my dime. So the $80,000 covers everything, Mark said, pulling out a file. Venue, catering, even the honeymoon deposit. Kevin assured me it's all set. I leaned forward, my voice even. Did he? Tell me, Mark. Did Kevin mention that he banned me from the wedding? That I'm not even invited to this extravaganza I'm supposedly funding? Mark's eyes widened. The pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the desk. Banned? No, he said family contributions were handled. This is awkward. Awkward, I echoed, short and sharp. Try insulting. He sent me the bill with a note saying I should be grateful, after raising him alone, after everything. Mark shifted, rubbing his temple. I don't know what to say. The contracts are signed, but without full payment, we can't proceed. Deposits are non-refundable, but the balance is due. Inform Kevin the wedding halts until he talks to me directly, I said, standing up. No funds from me, and if he pushes, remind him how fragile plans can be. Mark nodded slowly, looking stunned. I'll call him today. This changes things. As I stepped out into the crisp air, the lobby's sterile atmosphere felt less oppressive. I had struck the first blow, but Kevin wouldn't back down easily. I needed eyes and ears I could trust. Alex's name surfaced in my mind. He was Kevin's childhood best friend, the one he ditched when his corporate ambition took over. I remembered Alex at 12, showing up at our door after his parents' divorce. Elena had made him hot chocolate while Kevin and I played cards to distract him. I dialed his number before doubt could settle. Alex, it's Steven Torres. Been a long time. His voice came through, surprised but warm. Mr. T? Wow, how have you been? Is everything okay? Not exactly, I admitted. Kevin's getting married, but it's complicated. Can we meet? I need your expertise. I heard you're a private detective now. He chuckled dryly. Word gets around. Sure, the old cafe on Broadway in an hour. An hour later, I sat at a corner table. Alex arrived, taller than I remembered, with a detective's keen eyes and a camera bag slung over his shoulder. We shook hands firmly. Mr. T, you look good. Sorry about Elena. She was like a mom to me too. Thanks, Alex. And call me Steven. I slid him a coffee and laid out the situation. Kevin banned me, sent a bill for $80,000, and I'm fighting back. His face hardened. That sounds like him. He ditched me years ago when I wouldn't fake a reference for his job, said I was holding him back with my small-time gigs. He exploited others for his climb, I said. In college, Alex added, leaning in, he borrowed my project ideas and claimed them as his. When I called him out, he ghosted me. Victoria is the same. All about the image. We planned over refills. He would document the wedding from the outside, capturing any fallout with photos and video. We needed leverage. I invited him to my place that evening to set up more security and recording equipment. Ready to level up? Alex asked when he arrived at my door that night, shaking off his wet coat. We moved to the living room. He unpacked gadgets, a small recorder, hidden cameras, and apps for call logs. First, legal basics, he explained. In Kentucky, it is one-party consent for recordings. Hit this button mid-call. I practiced on a mock setup. He coached me through the tactics Kevin might use, gaslighting and deflection. Like when he blamed you for his mom's treatments not working, Alex said softly. I shared the memory of Elena in the hospital, her hand weak in mine, and Kevin accusing me of not fighting harder. She deserved better from all of us, I whispered. You gave everything, Alex replied. I owe you. You let me crash here when my folks split. Kevin just laughed and called me weak. We toasted quietly with our mugs to justice. He walked me through camera placement, angling them to catch faces at the door. I tested the feed on my phone, watching the image stabilize. A surge of strength rose in me. But as the device hummed, a new thought intruded. What if Kevin called tonight? The phone buzzed on the table, slicing through the evening quiet like a knife. I let it ring, watching the vibrations skitter the phone across the wood. The screen lit up. Kevin. Then it went to voicemail and buzzed again. Victoria. I ignored them both, pouring hot water over a tea bag. The aroma of chamomile grounded me as I recalled Alex's advice. Record everything. The notifications piled up. 3 voicemails, texts flashing urgent. I sat at the kitchen table and played the first one. Dad, it's Kevin. There's a misunderstanding with the payments. The planner called, said you pulled out. Call me right away. We need to sort this. His voice started as composed, but an edge of panic crept in. I replayed it, noting the desperation. He called it a misunderstanding, as if the $80,000 bill and the ban were just accidents. I played the second voicemail. Stephen, Victoria here. Kevin's upset. The vendors are threatening to cancel without your contribution. Don't do this. It's petty. Her tone was clipped and superior, like she was scolding a child. Petty. The word stung, but I smiled faintly. This was exactly what Alex warned me about, desperation masked as accusation. The third voicemail was Kevin again, the urgency ramping up. Dad, seriously pick up. Everything's falling apart. You owe us this after everything. I listened twice more, analyzing the rising pitch. They were starting to crack. Then a call came from an old mutual friend, Mrs. Hargrove. I answered briefly. Stephen, I heard whispers at the club, she said, her voice hesitant. Kevin's wedding troubles. People are saying there are money issues. I hope you're okay. Public whispers already. Mark Brennan had clearly started talking. It fueled me, a surge of control after years of being sidelined. But then another voicemail pinged. Kevin's voice was cracking this time. If you don't fix this, you'll regret it. The threat hung in the air. I spent the next day in intense anticipation, testing cameras and walking around the block to calm my nerves. Every car that passed made me flinch. By evening, I was on edge. When the phone finally rang, I gripped it tightly. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Kevin. Dad, finally, what the hell is going on? Mark says you refuse to pay. You're sabotaging our wedding. I breathed steadily. Sabotaging. You banned me. You sent a bill like I was a sponsor, not family. I remember your note, Kevin. Be grateful, you said. Look, it's not like that, he exploded. Victoria's friends, the crowd. You're retired, Dad. It wouldn't fit. But the money, you owe it. After Mom, after the struggles you caused. The jab at Elena twisted like a thorn, but I stayed calm. I raised you alone. I sold what I had for her care. You blamed me then, and you ignore me now. No, Kevin. There will be no payment. You're ruining everything, he shouted. Victoria's furious. The caterers want deposits. The estate is holding the date but threatening fees. Fix it. Fix what you broke, I replied. Talk to me like a son, not a banker. Victoria's voice cut in on speakerphone. Stephen, this is ridiculous. We're building a life. Your pettiness could cancel it all. Think of the embarrassment. Embarrassment, I countered, like banning your father? I'm thinking of the bill you sent. The honeymoon you expect me to fund while excluding me. It's duty, Dad. Kevin jumped back in. Family contributes. Admit it, you're just jealous of my success. Success built on using people, I said. Not anymore. He hung up abruptly. I stood in the silence, his words echoing. He had shown his hand. He was vulnerable. A text alert chimed from Alex. Vendors demanding payment. Rumors flying at the estate. Photos incoming. I opened the attachment. Blurry shots of workers pausing setups. A florist van idling uncertainly. The images fueled me. Then, Kevin's text flooded in. Selfish old man. Destroying our day over ego. My heart stayed steady as a neighbor, Mr. Ellis called. Stephen, I saw Kevin yelling at a delivery guy yesterday. Rude as hell, demanding discounts like he owned the place. He snubbed us at the block party, too. Acted too good for everyone. I leaned against the wall. Thanks, Ellis. What happened with the delivery? The guy dropped off invitations, and Kevin berated him for a crease. Said, do you know who I am? Folks are talking, Stephen. Vendors are pulling out. I thanked him and texted Alex. Kevin was alienating everyone. Alex replied instantly. Escalation incoming. Preps are faltering. But as I set the phone down, a new text from an unknown number popped up. Mr. Torres, regarding wedding cancellation fees. The words trailed off, spiking a fresh wave of urgency. The ticking clock on the mantel seemed to be counting down to something inevitable. The gray light of dawn seeped through the curtains on November 15th, 2024, the wedding day. Rain began to patter against the window panes like impatient fingers. I woke early, the ticking clock from the night before still echoing in my ears. The past week had been a rhythm of quiet vigilance. I monitored updates from Alex and ignored the escalating texts from Kevin. I took long walks in the crisp Lexington air to steel my nerves. Now, as I checked the weather app, the forecast showed steady downpours. It was a symbolic deluge washing away their pretenses. I brewed coffee and settled at the table. Alex's first text came at 7 a.m. at the estate. Vendors arriving or not. Photos soon. I sipped slowly as images trickled in. Florists were unloading vans only to repack half the arrangements. Their faces were pinched in frustration under umbrellas. Deposit issues, one caption read. They're leaving. The chaos unfolded in real-time snippets. A caterer truck idled in the rain. Workers boxed up crates of untouched china and silverware. The driveway was a slick, glossy mess. Guests started arriving around noon. Alex sent covert shots showing confused clusters under tents. Umbrellas bloomed like dark flowers. I could almost hear them asking, "Where is the setup?" I ignored a flurry of calls from Kevin. The phone vibrated like a trapped bee on the table. The voicemails piled up. I played one. His voice was frantic. "Dad, send the money now. Everything's falling apart. The estate managers are threatening to shut it down." The desperation was a far cry from his earlier arrogance. More photos arrived. The grand hall was only half dressed. Chairs were scattered haphazardly. There was no sign of the string quartet. Then a shot came that twisted something deep inside me. It was Victoria in her gown. Her expression was crumpled. Rain streaked the mansion windows behind her like tears. Doubt flickered briefly. Was this too cruel? Was I wrong to turn their day into a spectacle? But then I recalled the Bill's condescension. I remembered the note that cut deeper than any rain. The doubt dissolved into quiet satisfaction. Justice wasn't gentle. By afternoon, Alex reported that guests were milling around, and some were already leaving. Rumors were spreading about a family feud over funds. I paced my living room, envisioning the humiliation unfolding miles away. Another voicemail from Kevin came through, pleading this time. "Please, Dad, wire it. Guests are laughing. Help." I heard a guest murmur in one of Alex's audio clips. This is a disaster, poor planning. The downpour intensified, sheets of water blurring my yard. Nature itself seemed to be amplifying the reckoning. Then my phone rang again. Kevin's name flashed. I let it roll to voicemail. The sound was suddenly swallowed by a pounding on my front door. It was insistent and heavy. I approached slowly and peered through the peephole. Kevin and Victoria stood there. They were disheveled, wearing pajamas under hastily thrown coats. Their hair was plastered wet against their pale, drawn faces. I opened the door a crack. "What are you doing here?" Kevin pushed forward, water dripping from his sleeves onto my entry rug. "Dad, let us in. The wedding is ruined. Vendors left, guests scattered. It's a joke now." Victoria huddled behind him, her makeup smudged, her gown peeked absurdly from under her coat. "Stephen, please wire the money. We can salvage something." I stepped aside reluctantly, closing the door against the wind. They stood dripping in my hallway. The familiar scent of my home clashed with their desperation. "Salvage?" I asked, after banning me, after demanding I pay like a silent partner. Kevin ran a hand through his soaked hair. His voice broke. It was a mistake. Victoria's idea, the image, you know. But now everything's collapsed. "Help us, Dad, for old times." I crossed my arms, staying steady despite the emotional pull. A flashback hit me. Kevin as a teen after Elena's funeral, accusing me of weakness while I buried my grief in work. It fueled my resolve. "Old times?" I said. "Like when you blamed me for Mom's death. When you ignored me unless you needed cash?" Victoria interjected, her tone wavering. "We didn't mean it. It's the stress. The honeymoon is booked. Deposits are lost. Think of us." "Think of you," I echoed. "Would you value me without my wallet? Answer that." Kevin hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. "Of course. You're family. But success means standards. Please just transfer it." The admission hung heavy. Standards over bonds. It exposed the shallowness of his heart. "No, Kevin," I said firmly. "This is the consequence. Greed has a price." He started to beg, his voice rising. "You're destroying us," guests are whispering. Vendors mocked me. "Fix it for your son." Victoria clutched his arm, whispering urgently, but I just shook my head. "Go learn from this," I said. I moved to open the door. Kevin's final words tumbled out, raw and desperate. "Wait, Dad. I regret it. All of it." The rain roared outside. I closed the door on them. I watched through the window as their footsteps retreated into the storm. The echo of Kevin's regret faded into silence. I turned away and sank into the armchair by the window. Rain streaked the glass in fading patterns. Their car lights pierced the dusk before vanishing, leaving the house wrapped in a comforting hush. The next few days blurred into reflection. I fielded calls from curious neighbors and sorted through the emotional debris. One quiet evening, I burned the original bill in the fireplace. Its ashes were a symbolic release. By the end of the week, Alex texted confirmation. The wedding was a full collapse. The estate had refunded only a small portion and their reputations were tanked. "The buzz got me new clients thanks to the fallout," Alex told me when I called him. "Stephen, you did it. The photos show the empty tents. Guests were bailing. Kevin was circling and whispering, but his arrogance finally bit him." I leaned back, glancing at an open photo album on the table. Faded images of happier times stirred my heart, but they didn't overwhelm me. "I appreciate your help, Alex. It feels freeing." He laughed lightly. "Anytime. Have you heard from him?" "Not since that night," I said. "But maybe he'll learn." We chatted about old pranks, the conversation turning to my future plans. Perhaps a trip for me, unburdened. Later that day, I received an unexpected outreach. Mrs. Hargrove emailed me, inspired by the rumors. "Stephen, your stand reminded me to value real ties," she wrote. "Coffee soon?" It warmed me to see alliances blooming from the chaos. I muttered to myself over a solitary toast with my morning coffee. To dignity reclaimed. The home felt fuller now, not with things, but with self-worth. Kevin's lesson might sting, but growth often did. The hints of his regret suggested that seeds had been planted. As the rain finally cleared, I stepped outside into the crisp air. Sunlight was breaking through the clouds. I walked down to the mailbox, the same spot where the $80,000 demand had arrived just weeks ago. The neighborhood was quiet, the air smelling of damp earth and fallen leaves. I felt a strange sense of peace. I had lost a son's wedding, but I had found my own voice again. I looked at the framed photo of Elena on the mantle when I returned inside. I think she would have understood. She always believed in standing up for what was right, even when it was hard, especially when it was family. My phone buzzed again. It wasn't Kevin or Victoria. It was a message from a local engineering firm I used to consult for. They had heard I was active again and wanted to know if I'd take on a small project. I smiled. The world was opening up. I wasn't just a pensioner to be hidden away. I was a man with experience, with value, and with a bank account that belonged only to me. I sat down at my laptop, but this time I wasn't looking for vendors or social media leaks. I was looking at flights. Somewhere warm. Somewhere far from the drama of Lexington and the shadow of the Ashford estate. I had spent my life building things for others. Now, it was time to build something for myself. I picked up the phone to call Alex back. I wanted to thank him properly, maybe take him out for a real dinner. But as I scrolled through my recent calls, I saw a new number, a local area code I didn't recognize. I hit dial, thinking it was the engineering firm. "Hello?" I said. A woman's voice answered. It was soft, hesitant, and sounded like she had been crying. "Mr. Torres, it's Victoria's mother. We need to talk about what happened." The voice of Victoria's mother, Diane, was a jagged contrast to the polished silence of my kitchen. I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to negotiate a surrender, but not hers. She told me that Kevin and Victoria were staying in a cramped motel because they couldn't face the neighbors after the estate locked the gates. She said the debt for the non-refundable deposits was crushing them, and Victoria was blaming Kevin for my defiance. Diane's voice rose, sharp with an entitlement that mirrored her daughter's. She told me I had a moral obligation to fix the mess I created. I didn't raise my voice. I told her that a moral obligation usually starts with an invitation to the family table, not a bill for the centerpiece. I hung up before she could respond. The silence that followed was heavy, but my heart was light. I went to the window and watched the streetlights flicker on. My son had sent his future mother-in-law to do his dirty work, proving he still viewed me as a problem to be managed rather than a father to be respected. The next morning, I met Alex at a small park. He looked tired but energized. He showed me a series of digital messages he'd intercepted through public forum tags. Victoria was being shredded online. Local vendors were warning others about the Torres wedding as a cautionary tale of non-payment and arrogance. Alex told me that Kevin's employer had caught wind of the public scene at the estate. In the tech world, reputation was everything, and Kevin's image as a high-flying executive was crumbling under the weight of Weddinggate. I felt a pang of fatherly instinct, a ghost of the man who used to bandage Kevin's scraped knees. But then I remembered the itemized bill. $10,000 for a honeymoon suite while I lived on a fixed income. I told Alex to keep watching. I wasn't going to leak anything else, but I wasn't going to stop the truth from coming out either. We walked past the Little League field where Kevin used to play. I saw a father coaching his son, and for a second the pain was almost unbearable. I had to remind myself that justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about the truth. That afternoon, Kevin appeared at my door again. This time he was alone. He didn't have a coat, and the cold Lexington wind had turned his face a blotchy red. He didn't push his way in. He stood on the porch looking at his shoes. He told me he was sorry. He said he had lost his way and that Victoria's world had blinded him. I looked at him, searching for the boy who used to hide in my shoulder during thunderstorms. I asked him one question. If the $80,000 had been paid and the wedding had been a success, would he be standing on this porch today? Kevin couldn't look me in the eye. His silence was the only answer I needed. He wasn't sorry for the betrayal. He was sorry the betrayal had failed. I told him that I loved him, but I didn't trust him. I closed the door, the click of the lock sounding like a final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. The weeks following the collapse were a study in reconstruction. I began working with the engineering firm, my mind clicking back into the familiar rhythms of logic and structural integrity. It was ironic. While I was helping them fix old bridges, I was finally letting the bridge to my son remain broken. The work gave me a sense of purpose that didn't involve checking bank balances or scanning social media. I felt like Steven Torres again, not just dad or the sponsor. Alex called me with a final update. Kevin and Victoria had officially split. The pressure of the debt and the public humiliation had stripped away the glamour, leaving nothing but resentment. Kevin had moved into a small apartment on the other side of town and was working double shifts to pay off the vendors. He was finally learning what I had tried to teach him for decades, that things cost money and respect costs even more. I decided it was time for my trip. I booked a flight to a small coastal town in Oregon, a place Elena and I had always talked about visiting. I didn't need a mansion or lobster flown in from Maine. I just needed the sound of the ocean and the freedom of a clear conscience. I spent my last evening in Lexington packing a small suitcase. I came across the pocket watch again. It was still ticking, steady and true. I realized then that my son's greatest mistake wasn't asking for the money. It was thinking that my life was small because my house was modest. He had looked at my career and my savings and seen failure. He hadn't seen the thousands of hours of love and sacrifice that had built the very ladder he used to look down on me. I put the watch in my pocket. I would keep it as a reminder of where I came from and where I was finally going. Before I left for the airport, I stopped by the cemetery. The grass over Elena's grave was green despite the cooling weather. I sat there for a long time, telling her about the wedding that never was. I told her I'd protected what we built together. I felt a breeze move through the trees, a soft, familiar touch that made me close my eyes. I wasn't alone. I had the memory of a good life and the promise of a peaceful future. I drove to the airport as the sun began to rise. The Lexington skyline was small in the rearview mirror. I checked my phone one last time. There was a text from an unknown number. "I'm starting over. I'm sorry." I didn't reply. Not because I was cruel, but because words weren't enough anymore. I needed to see action. I needed to see the man he could become without my wallet to lean on. The Oregon coast was everything I needed. The air was cold and salt-heavy, and the waves crashed against the jagged rocks with a power that made my own troubles feel insignificant. I spent my days walking the beach and my evenings reading by a fire. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. I wasn't bracing for an accusation or a demand. I was just Steven. I received a letter in the mail, forwarded from my home address. It was from Mark Brennan. He wrote to tell me that he had finally settled the accounts with the vendors. He also mentioned that he had used my story as a lesson for new clients about the importance of family and transparency. He thanked me for my firmness. It was a strange sort of validation, but I accepted it. Even in the world of high-end events, truth had a place. I met a woman named Martha at a local bookstore. She was a widow too, and we spent hours talking about our late spouses and the complexities of raising children who grow up to be strangers. She told me about her daughter in Seattle who hadn't spoken to her in 3 years over a dispute about an inheritance. We laughed at the absurdity of it all, the way money can turn blood into ice. It was the first time I had laughed with someone who truly understood. I started to realize that my life wasn't over just because I was retired. I had decades of experience to share and a heart that was still capable of opening up. I didn't need Kevin's approval to be happy. I didn't need to be tucked away in a corner of his perfect life. I was the architect of my own existence. I decided to stay in Oregon for another month. The Lexington home could wait. The faded curtains and the quiet kitchen weren't a prison anymore. They were just a place I lived. One night, as I sat on the deck of my rental cottage, I looked out at the dark expanse of the Pacific. I thought about the $80,000. It was still in the bank, accruing interest. It represented my past, but it was also going to fund my future. I wasn't going to spend it on chandeliers or lobster. I was going to spend it on experiences, on helping people who actually appreciated it, and on making sure that the rest of my years were lived with dignity. I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my phone and saw a photo from Alex. It was a picture of Kevin. He was at a construction site wearing a hard hat and holding a blueprint. He looked exhausted, but there was a focus in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Alex added a note. He's working as an assistant project manager for a small firm. He's actually working, Stephen. I returned to Lexington in the late winter. The house felt different when I walked through the door. It wasn't a place of memories and ghosts anymore. It was just a house. I took down the faded curtains and replaced them with something bright. I moved the photo of young Kevin from the kitchen table to a shelf in the den. It was a part of my history, but it wasn't the center of my world. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Victoria had moved to Atlanta. Kevin stayed in Lexington, quietly working and paying off his debts. He didn't call me, and I didn't call him. We were two planets in separate orbits, waiting for the gravity of the past to settle into something stable. I went back to my consulting work, finding a new satisfaction in solving problems that had clear, logical answers. One Sunday morning, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Kevin standing there. He wasn't disheveled or crying. He was wearing a simple work shirt and jeans. He held out a small envelope. I took it, expecting another bill or a legal notice. I opened it and found a check for $500. Attached was a note. The first installment. I know it's not much, but it's mine. I'm sorry for the note I sent in October. I was a man I don't want to be. I looked at the check, then at my son. This was the first time in his adult life he had given me something that cost him effort. I didn't tell him I didn't need the money. I didn't tell him it was okay. I just nodded and invited him in for coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning light streaming through the new curtains. We didn't talk about the wedding or the $80,000. We talked about engineering. We talked about structural loads and blueprints. It wasn't a full reconciliation. The hurt was still there, a thin layer of frost over the foundation of our relationship. But the frost was melting. As we sat there, I realized that my revenge hadn't been about destroying his wedding. It had been about saving him from himself. By refusing to be his ATM, I had forced him to be a man. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, and the most important. When he left, I walked him to his car. It was an old beat-up sedan, a far cry from the luxury vehicles Victoria used to flaunt. He started the engine, and the sound was loud and honest. He waved, and I waved back. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time after he drove away. The neighborhood was quiet, the air crisp with the promise of spring. I went back inside and looked at the photo of Elena. I thought about the life we had built, the sacrifices we had made, and the boy we had raised. He was finally learning the value of things. I felt a deep, resonant peace settle over me. I had reclaimed my dignity, I had protected my legacy, and I had given my son a chance at a real life. I picked up my coffee mug and took a sip, the warmth spreading through me. I was Stephen Torres, and for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. So, if this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.